the best of the week on Relevant Radio.
When you leave the Catholic Church, everything becomes arbitrary. You know, the Church of England is one of those churches that is praised in contrast to Catholicism, or Catholic faith, for being, quote, flexible. But is it flexibility or is it arbitrary? It's arbitrary because it's not grounded on truth. It's not even grounded on principle. There is no principle. Even within Anglicanism, there are fractions everywhere. Especially over the last 45 years, you've seen this heightened level of Anglicans becoming Catholic. You may have heard of the program of the ordinariate. When Anglicans started attempting to ordain priests in 1992 as part of that third wave of feminism, that third wave of feminism really led to this saying men and women are just absolutely interchangeable. You see, when you took babies out of sex, you took sex out of marriage, you said women were liberated if they didn't have children or could have them on their own terms. Well, suddenly there started to be this blurring of what is male and what is female. Lo, behold, boom. This onslaught of same-sex interaction and activity because you erased what marriage was. You have this onslaught of gender dysphoria. All of it ties back to saying that women can become priests. Now, that isn't my primary topic today, although we have talked about it. I'm pretty sure right when it was announced that Sarah would be the new Archbishop of Canterbury. And the question is, well, why can't women be priests? Why can't women be bishops? Why can't women be popes? I'm not taking a deep dive into this now, but I'm going to link to the episode where I did in the show notes as well as on social media. I think it's when they first announced that she would be the new Archbishop. Here's the bottom line. We do what Jesus did. Jesus was a man and Jesus was a priest. The history is very, very clear on this. He chose only men to be priests. He could have chosen anyone. And I think another compelling argument is of all the most holy people on earth, he didn't even choose his own mother to be a priest. But looking at some of the data, there's a report from the St. Barnabas Society in England, and it actually notes that a third of Catholic priests in England are formerly Anglican. It notes that, let's say there are roughly 10,000 Anglican priests. Well, 700 of them became Catholic. That's almost a tenth. Why? Because the so-called flexibility of other churches that aren't Catholic isn't centered on solid ground. You see, this diversification, this decentralized leadership that might all be really trendy language in the business world, give or take, it actually doesn't fly when it comes to religion. It's funny, I have a friend who hasn't quite made the jump to Catholicism yet. I call her a closet Catholic. There are a couple of big things hanging her up. But when I talk about, well, why haven't you converted yet? And she goes, well, she recognizes there's one person in particular that gets in the way of her conversion, and she's willing, but she always talks about how, well, I haven't joined an organized religion, namely Catholicism, yet because of this particular relationship. And I'm always struck by that because she recognizes organized religion is the way to go because it's founded on truth, and not any organized religion of Catholicism, a church founded by Christ. But let's look at what happens when the Anglican Church diversifies. Since leaving Rome, you've seen the rejection of papal authority. You've seen the rejection of that truly tried and true system that the church is made up of scripture and tradition, that the two have to go hand in hand, complement each other, be lived out to live out the life of what Christ and his apostles and the early church lived out, and see how it's consistent with a Catholic moral faith and ethic with scripture, and that is what is handed down and relived over and over again in all of the teachings for over 2,000 years now. There's a reason why you can look at what the church teaches, the Catholic Church teaches about contraception, and actually see it's consistent in the Old Testament. For example, reading the story of Onan and how he was struck dead when he tried to spill his seed on the earth after engaging in intimacy, and how it was rejected for there to be this rejection of children in the intimate act. Again, you have a consistency of the living tradition of the church on contraception, the tradition going all the way back to sacred scripture itself. You have the rejection of the sacrament of confession. They're really kind of only two sacraments, I guess you could say, in the Anglican Church. Baptism and communion, but communion isn't actually real because it's not the Eucharist. Well, I mean, one, because they don't have holy orders, but two, because they don't follow what the church teaches in order to accomplish that as well. So you have, and I think it's really significant, when you reject the sacrament of confession, there's this rejection of the reality of sin. When you make the Eucharist simply symbolic, you have this rejection of the very power and life of God in our lives. When you say women can be ordained and you fall away from the consistent, clear teaching lived out by the life of Christ himself and who he chose as his priests, as his bishops, again, everything becomes arbitrary. You see, there's this rejection even of the kingdom of heaven by their rejecting Mary and the saints. You even see this rejection within the context of marriage and divorce. It's a rejection of the pursuit of holiness, the pursuit of purpose in the human person. When you say, well, marriage is arbitrary. It could be between one man, one woman, two men, two women. When you see that happen, when you say that you can divorce within marriage, when you say that you can remarry after marriage, you say there's no sense of commitment and fidelity. You destroy the very institution of marriage. You destroy the very fidelity of spouses to each other for the sake of the child. You make it just about spouses and no longer about children. That's why the church's teaching about marriage is in some respects almost scandalous to the person in love and wanting to marry. The church says the primary end of marriage is the procreation and education of children. Not you, not your spouse. It's having babies and raising them in the faith to be holy, excellent human beings who also find their purpose, namely in God, which is within the context of the organized religion of the Catholic Church, because God wrote the blueprint for the human person. You see, this quote-unquote flexibility of other churches outside of the Catholic Church, namely Anglicanism, and we're talking about, quote, Sarah, the new Archbishop of Canterbury. When you have that quote-unquote flexibility, everything becomes arbitrary and lacks no truth, no purpose, no meaning, no clarity. This isn't a war on women, or namely one woman, Sarah, the new Archbishop of Canterbury, that I'm engaging on. It's something really simple. There are bumpers that we bump up against in life. There are boundaries, there are blueprints, there's purpose. When something doesn't look right, it's okay to say something. And I think that's my big take, is we see the new Archbishop of Canterbury isn't a man. The new Archbishop of Canterbury is a woman. And this is what happens after century after century after century after century after century of falling away from the one true holy Catholic Church.
That was the best of the week on Relevant Radio. The best way to listen to the best of the week is on the Relevant Radio app, free and always free. Download and share the #1 free Catholic app today in the App Store.